Hey everybody, how are you doing? A good afternoon to you and a good Saturday this weekend of the Easter weekend. I'm dialing in, quote unquote, from my mom's place in North Carolina. We're actually about to head out to California for my niece's wedding next week. I hope that's not TMI for too many people, but it is really something special when somebody one generation removed from you and somebody you're very close to is now, a graceful young woman, has just an amazing, future life partner and fiance, and right now, and seeing her grow up and see her get close to this gentleman, and now they're about to get married, is really something special. On top of that, it's a very beautiful spring day here in North Carolina. I'm wearing my spring colors and wishing you all just a very good and hopefully relaxing weekend. So this is a video companion script, as we call them. We do these with some notes, some newsletters that we write that we think are worthy of, a little bit more of explanation. That's sort of more color as opposed to the more deeper fundamental, newsletter that we've written. And we wrote a newsletter recently on that's starting a new series. We call it the cost of survival, and it's really looking at the United States healthcare system. I'm no expert. I'm basically a biotech analyst. I've worked in biotech most of my life, but I've seen the entire ecosystem around biotech, and seeing healthcare costs getting up to now 20% of American GDP. You had the episode with Louis, I believe, Mangione, if I'm saying his name right, and the United Healthcare CEO, which ended up in a homicide, and but caused a lot of very different reactions in American society. You hear just horror stories of people struggling under medical debt, and the newsletter that I wrote in late March was actually dedicated to a family friend who has been through that himself. And it is something I've been thinking about for a very long time. And I wanted to think about it originally and not in the perspective of the system as it is now, or a one-payer system, and be caught in sort of a binary fashion. So let's get into it. Our sort of one idea behind healthcare costs, and the title of the newsletter was "The Cost of Survival, Part One." When healthcare becomes financing, when innovation compounds over time, but the system still pays for it upfront. And that's essentially the first part of our analysis. I think that most of us have been conditioned to believe that healthcare in the United States is expensive because the treatments themselves are expensive. And that's true, at least partially. But I've been thinking about this differently. I really have. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I was actually scared to write this newsletter because I felt like I was getting, outside my area of expertise by far, and I didn't want to talk about stuff I didn't really have much idea about, and also just cause other people consternation. But I have been bouncing this idea of many people and slowly bringing it to a boil. And so this thinking about this differently that I've been doing, what is the real issue isn't just about the cost of healthcare, but how we pay for it. And that's really where I've been sort of focusing on. Let me simplify this. Most modern therapies, especially in biotech, have very specific shape. High upfront costs, benefits that accrue over years, sometimes decades. Think about that for a second. You pay today, but the value shows up slowly. Fewer hospital visits, better quality of life, sometimes the ability to work, live, and function normally. Now, here's the disconnect. Our system is built to pay for healthcare as if it was a short-term expense, right? It was a one-off. But the reality is it's a long-term investment. I think most people who look at it, my dad, he got me young, running at a very young age. I was actually very roly-poly when I was young, 13, 14 years old, like really roly-poly. Between the ages of 13 and 15, I grew like 7 inches, but I didn't even gain 1 pound. That's how roly-poly I was. My dad got me running at the age of 13 and 14 by a very simple piece of advice. It wasn't like, oh, get fit or look great. He was like, running is an investment in your own health. It's a long-term investment. And so that was also part of the genesis of this newsletter, looking at healthcare financing. Our system again is built to pay for healthcare as if it's a short-term expense, but the reality is it's a long-term investment, and that's a mismatch between what we pay and when we get value. This creates a lot of the tension we see in the system. There's a useful way to think about this. Take housing. We don't expect someone to pay upfront for a 30-year asset. it doesn't make any sense. Actually, America is one of the few markets that allows us to amortize it over time, and that's why housing has grown exponentially. I mean, people have written about this and know about this far better than I. But we amortize the cost of a house. We spread the payments out over time. We use financing to align costs with income. The system isn't perfect, but it makes something large and long-term accessible. And just remember, there's lots of benefits to somebody owning their own house. There's less sort of transient movement. Usually people become more responsible because they've got that mortgage payment. You also have like just more stable societies at that place, right? So there's these like sort of qualitative sort of benefits. They don't necessarily show up, but have been studied and accounted for now over time with the housing mortgage market. So we're often asking people or payers to absorb large costs immediately in healthcare, even when the benefits stretch far off into the future. That's a very different structure, right? So now take something like cystic fibrosis therapies. They're expensive, no way around that. They cost 200, 300, up to $400,000 a year. That's just the therapy. That's not all the other care that goes into administering that therapy, bringing the patient in, the point of care, et cetera, et cetera. But these therapies can reduce hospitalizations, extend life, allow patients to work and live more normally. So the value is real and long term. We still treat the cost like a one-time event. That's the gap. That's what really puzzles me. So maybe the question isn't, why is healthcare so expensive? Maybe the better question is, why are we financing healthcare this way? Because if the value is long term, then the financing probably needs to be as well. I wrote a deeper piece on this. Please look at it. It's free for everybody to read. I'm sure there's lots of points of contention error in there. It's on Substack. It's under the Biotech Capital Compass newsletter series. And would love to get people commenting and debating this. We'll write more on this. This is part one of a series where I'm trying to think through this much more carefully, not from a policy angle. It's not my area of expertise, but from a biotech and capital markets perspective. I'm a biotech analyst who worked, on Wall Street for a long time, and I love the financial markets. I love financial innovation, and the housing healthcare market, actually mortgages, are actually one of the great and slicing and dicing mortgages. That almost led to the housing crisis in 2008 2009. That actually people have written on how that innovation is just spectacular in the worlds of financial annals of financial innovation sort of history. So again, that's a perspective I'm writing from. And in the next part, I'll try to sketch what a system like this could actually look like, at least in theory. It'll be very broad. And maybe again, like I said, I might be over my skis or skiing, snowboarding down a slope. I'm a snowboarder that I have absolutely no business being on, and so making a mess of it. But I'm going to give it a shot. So again, thank you so very much for paying attention. This is a very sort of general first intro and hopefully fun intro to this, a very serious topic, but hopefully it is something we can start debating and really start thinking about this healthcare financing model, about adding in a layer of healthcare financing, which can let people finance for the long term, just like they do with housing, so that we're not stuck with people having to pay healthcare as a one-off. But essentially to them, that's what it becomes. It becomes like a debt payment, like a credit card. You just made this massive credit card payment. Now you got to pay it off over the next 20 years, right? So anyways, I hope you're having a good day. I hope this was kind of enjoyable and not too much. We'll be writing on this more and publishing on this more and recording on this more. Take care. Have a good Saturday and the rest of your week.